Hello, people. A little bit earlier than usual. Or should I say on time? Depends on how you look at it, right? Hope everyone's doing well. Hey, Dennis. Good to see you back. Congratulations on finishing your work. It's looking great, man. Bodhi! Bodhi's back. Good to see you. How are you both doing? Let's have a look at some of the people today. Quick Wednesday review. It's not going to be a crazy session as usual, so that's good. It's going to be a chill session for now. Thank you. Yeah! It's looking real nice. Let's actually have a look at it. I'm curious. Still in my list. It's not. How dare it not be in my list? Finished projects. Ooh, I've got a couple of people that we gave feedback to. Look. Let's switch it over here. Yeah. This is not from you, but I also noticed that Nadia finished her work as well. It's looking cool. It's looking awesome. Yeah. The swords are really nice. I really like the swords. Oh, the nice grass flow. It's always so satisfying, you know? So satisfying to see some nice grass flowing. Yup. It's cool. Then we got a medieval card from Dennis. Oh, it's with a Y. Okay. It was popping up before. That's cool. Yeah. Oh man, I never scroll all the way down, right? But trees are looking really nice. I like the way that they feel fluffy as well. You got these dead trees as well. Looking cool. Wait, was that? Yeah. Okay, it's made by you. That's cool. Sheet and then the inspiration. That's cool, man. That's cool. Again, congratulations on finalizing it. I was gonna do a combination of finalizing and finishing it. Yeah, great stuff, man. Great stuff. I should honestly reply, right? Come on. Or did I already reply? I can't even remember. Did I? I did. I did. Can't even keep track. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I can't even keep track. I basically spend no time on ArtStation anymore, so... I wish my grass would look like that. I think in her case, the actual atlases were from Megascans though, right? But the grass clumping was done by herself, so you can definitely recreate it. Just a flowing grass, just really satisfying. Dennis is gonna enter for next week Wednesday. Now learning designer. That's awesome. That's great to see. What are you starting out with in designer? What did you pick? Let's see if I can... 10? And then we're gonna get started. Just a second. Let me get the Discord up to get some additional context as well. You can have a look. For people that are new to the stream, or just popping in, what this stream is basically going to be is I'm going to go through all the people that have posted their work on our Discord, and they can basically tag it for Whip Wednesday, and all the people who have tagged it, I'm going to review live on the stream. So if you want to become a part of the stream, feel free to hop into our Discord, which you can access in the description down below. So yeah. I think how many people do we have? 9 by the looks of it. It's going to be good. And then Dennis is making bricks, of course. Honestly, that's a good way to start out, right? Yeah, Kyle came across a great resource from Daniel Tiger. I too am learning designer. Daniel Tiger is one of those people that is really good for like, that's like my go-to reference for any type of like designer thing, right? He has like a bunch of courses on like fundamentals in designer, which are really good. Then he also takes you through like specific materials and how to create them too. Really good stuff in there. We also have we have two great workshops on material creation as well. But I wouldn't recommend them as beginners. I think the concepts are like a little bit more advanced, right? The biome workshop is great. I learned a ton from that one as well, especially how to modularize your workflow within Substance. Because before I was creating a lot of unique stuff every time, but now I'm basically making atlases and then reusing atlases and recombining them in new ways, which is awesome. I like working that way. Am I allowed to post a Gumroad link for Den? I don't think we allow links. Just, you know, there's too much spamming going on. But I will link it. Because it is a great resource. Let's see. Let's go to Daniel Tiger. Where is his stuff? Give me that portfolio link. Tutorial link. Here we go. And then if other people are interested, they can go and check it out too. Let's see. Any windows? I also learned Substance Designer mainly from Javier Perez videos. Yeah, he's really good as well. Really good. So here you go. Go check out Daniel Tiger's Gumroad if you want to check out like more resources for learning Substance Designer. Javier Perez videos are really good as well. Hey, Ankur Gupta. Good to see you here. We got Michael coming in as well. That's awesome. Nice. Yeah. Man, I wish I wish I could recommend my own resources, but I fear like all of them are like really out of date. Like I have like a really old resource on how to make like your own tiles, right? But man, they're probably so out of date. And it's also like PDF, right? So it's a lot of reading. It has a lot of visuals, right? But yeah. I think they're a little bit out of date. So Gott is coming in. Any advice for a newbie learning environment design for game using procedural workflows? I would honestly, in the beginning, not get into procedural workflows if environment art is like your thing, right? There's a lot of layers to that question already. But I would definitely dive into like what the individual steps are first before you can like proceduralize them, right? That's definitely where I would start, because a lot of it is going to depend on the handcrafted workflows before you can build on top of it with procedural workflows. It also depends on what you mean. If you're just talking about like generating levels with pre-existing assets, that is like totally different, right? Talking about something completely different. So yeah, maybe give me some extra details on what you want to achieve, and we can go from there. Michael, is it too late to submit a whip for this week? Yes, unfortunately it is. Like, I don't really like doing this like on stream. It's always pretty annoying to do stuff live on stream. But feel free to tag it for next week though. I'll be happy to have a look at it. Rogerio was my designer teacher back in 2015. Really good tutorials published under Nomon. Yes, yeah. He's really good at that stuff too. 100%. We got some really good suggestions here in the chat, so that's great. And Dennis is saying I can always update my own tutorials or even make it a video tutorial. No, I think honestly I am. This is a weird thing, right? Like, I don't like doing like edited, pre-recorded, like that kind of stuff. Like, I've tried it like a bunch of times. It never really worked out. And I was just like, look, I'm just gonna do like the live streaming thing. I feel like I'm way better just talking on the fly than having like a script and having it prepared and all that kind of stuff. I'll leave that to other people. Who knows? Maybe at a certain point, I'll have to get back into it. It will be cool though. So many opportunities out there, right? Because, yeah, there's never enough resources, especially good ones. Let's see. Okay. So, it's time that we dive into it. So, we're gonna... Tutorial on stream is also cool. That is something that I've been thinking about, honestly. But it takes, like, a little bit more prep than just doing a stream, right? Yeah, but that would be cool. I've been kind of thinking about like doing, I mean, this is in my head for a long time, right? But like themed streams, right? Where you know what the stream is going to be before like it's live. So for example, Will is saying like creating like a glass like live on stream, right? So that you know what you're getting into. But I don't know. Like, it depends on time and all that stuff too, right? Working on a bunch of other stuff at the moment. So, it's another idea that's going to go in the back of my head, and then, yeah, we'll see if I ever get to it. Garcia, that's because your GPU is just running out of video memory. You might not have enough, depending on your video card. There are some ways around it to lower your scalability settings inside of Unreal to make it basically like not as demanding on your graphics card. But yeah, that's like one suggestion that I can give to look into immediately, but it might be like a whole bunch of other issues if your GPU is actually crashing, right? So it can be a bunch of stuff. If you're using a laptop, it can be overheating. If you're using a desktop, it can be overheating depending on like your setup. But I would definitely try to lower your scalability settings inside of Unreal first. Would you ever be able to create a glass tutorial like the one on your ArtStation Live? If you talk about like recreating, yeah. I don't think that would be like too difficult. It's just now that tutorial was made in Unreal Engine 4, right? And I would have to do like a lot of research before I do that kind of stream. To do it in Unreal Engine 5 with like all the new bells and whistles. But yeah. Who knows? Let's get into it. Maybe because you're talking about it. Oh yeah, of course it didn't work on Unreal Engine 5. Yeah. Because like they changed like the whole setup, right? Like we're no longer using pre-Lumen days. We're in a whole new dimension right now. Yeah, of course it's not gonna work. Talking about your work though, if we make that switch immediately. Talking about the translucent shadows, right? Because that is what you want. There is an option where you can set like translucent shadows, and I have got that working in Unreal Engine 5 on another project that I was working on, but since then we have changed the shader to not be translucent anymore because it wasn't like performant enough for what we were doing. So there are definitely options. You can definitely get it to work. You just have to go for like, yeah, you just have to do like a lot of digging. I don't know on the top of my head like where it was, right? Yeah, the only thing that I can say is that you can definitely get it working because we had it working in Unreal Engine 5 as well. You might have to, yeah, look into the specifics of it, right? Okay, but I'm actually gonna go like one step back, right? Because so the glass, right? I'm sorry that I can't give you any specifics, right? But I definitely know that there's like a checkbox somewhere that says like translucent shadows. And I think you also have to go into your directional light or whatever light you're using and make sure that it is casting translucent shadows as well. So you have translucent shadows on the mesh and on your light. And I think with glass, you might have to set it to per pixel. Does that mean all the lights in the scene? No. Only the light that is affecting the glass. And I would only do one. That's where I would start. Because I'm gonna be honest, like apart from doing like a lot of architectural visualization, like glass is, or like any transparent surface is rarely used a lot in games. So yeah, once you start noticing it, it's gonna be very difficult to notice it in games when it comes to glass because it is really expensive. But what I was gonna say about the glass is taking a step back and right now not focusing on the glass because we got some fundamental issues with the scene that are going on at the moment, right? So take a step back and pull yourself out of like being so close to your work, and then looking at like the fundamentals. And that's where you were coming in and you were saying like, hey, something doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel cohesive. I don't know if it's because of the composition or I want some help on the lighting, right? I would focus on that first and then later on focus on the glass, right? So we talked about this before with your previous work, I think, but I'm gonna ask a question here. Where do I look? Right? Me as a person looking at this piece, like, where do I look? Where are you guiding me to look? Right? That's what I want to see from like a piece of art. And that usually boils down to a focal point, right? You can then pick that singular point or that area in your scene that you're going to point me towards using lighting, composition, contrast, like a bunch of other stuff, right? But I want to know where I'm supposed to look first with the focal point. And then we can take that focal point and really work with our lighting, right? So for example, what could happen here is, let's say you want me to focus on the piano, right? Piano is an interesting piece in the middle of the scene. Maybe putting the blinds on some of the other windows so that the only light coming in doesn't light the whole scene, but it actually only lights like the area where the piano is, right? So then what's going to happen if you have the scene in like a top-down view, right? What I'm trying to do is, if this is the piano area, I'm trying to cover this in shadow. Cover this in shadow as well. So that we have contrast between all of these areas. And that we pull the attention towards the middle of the scene. Because that's where you want us to look, right? So that would be like a major thing. If the piano is your focal point, then try to build your lighting around that focal point, right? Like, make sure that if I were to, there's a couple of tricks, right? Like, you can turn everything into like grayscale and then see where the brightest values are in your scene. Or you can also do what is called the squint test, where you make it like really small and then make sure that what you want us to look at like becomes more visible in the scene compared to everyone else, right? So yeah, that's where I would start. Pick out that focal point, then support it with lighting. And then think about how you can extra reinforce it with the composition of the scene as well. Because right now, everything is kind of just scattered in the scene very chaotically, right? But what you want to do is you want to make way for us to be able to look at the piano without being blocked by like a bunch of stuff. For example, this table or this like dining set that's in the front of us. If you move that just a little bit so that we create like a little corridor here, that's going to invite us into the scene already, right? So stuff like that can be really helpful. So I would really look into like composition and like a bunch of tricks there, right? Like there's a lot of tricks when it comes to composition. Yeah, so like a lot of tricks when it comes to the composition, leading lines, making sure that you have like a good foreground, middle ground, background, make sure that you have enough contrast. All that kind of stuff can be helped here, right? But that's what I would do. Using leading lines. Then giving it space, right? So rest versus detail is something that we talk about like a lot as well, right? If you want something detailed to stand out, for example, the piano, make some space, right? Like let it take up that space and have it like contrast by nothing being around it. It's a good way of like forcing separation between objects as well. And it forces us to focus on the thing that is important, right? Hey Andrea! Just wanted to pop in and say hi. Can't wait to watch the playback. Nice! Mattia is sharing like a whole bunch of really interesting tricks. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am also going to be speaking about what you were asking before, Mridul. So, because I think you brought up an interesting point. And then we can dive into what Mattia is saying as well. Hudson, we already have like a workshop, right? Like, I think we have 2 workshops on people that do designer. Same for Justin as well. And we are in talks with some really interesting people that are specifically very skillful in the craft of substance designer, you know? Oh my god, you're the first person that said my name correctly? I'm glad I got someone's name right. Because you're probably gonna see me struggle with like a whole bunch of words on stream here, so that's awesome. Okay, Will, I hope that this helped. Focus on the bigger picture. Really focus on getting the lighting right. And the way that you should see lighting, right? The way that I look at it is, you really need to start painting with it, right? Like, again, where do you want the focus to be? Like, paint that in brighter compared to like all the rest, right? That's the way that I'm looking at things. Does the color of the scene blend too much? Well, the color of the scene blend too much because now everything is like lit up the same way, right? So those two issues, they kind of go hand in hand. But what is going to happen is if you, for example, have like your foreground, right? So you have like the entire foreground and that is in shadow. It's also gonna change the colors of the scene too, right? So I would do a lighting pass first, and if you still think that like everything still blends together, then we can look into like changing some of the colors, right? But I would start with the lighting first. Let's see. Let's see if there was something else, right? So composition and lighting. Yeah. Okay. So we kind of got everything, I think. I would definitely start there, lighting first, and then see using the squint test, turning it to grayscale, right? Like use those tools to then see if you have enough contrast, right? We'll do like a quick exercise. So if I'm gonna go to ArtStation, I'm gonna bring it up here. And we're just gonna take a random one here, right? So I'm just gonna from Tiziano. Thank you so much for lending us your beautiful art. We're just gonna turn it into black and white for now to drive the point home. So we can do black and white on that only, right? And this is why I love looking at concept art, because most of them do such a beautiful job of playing around with the values and like where you want like people to look, right? So you can immediately see that like this artist like deliberately like put shadow on this part and basically the entire foreground, right? Apart from this. So we have like nice contrasting layering going on in the whole scene. And then where you actually want people to look is going to be part of like the brightest area, right? It also helps that it is contrasted with some of the darker areas right next to it. Because it's not only like how bright an area is, but it's also how contrasting it is to its neighbors too, right? Like these are all like different tools that are being used really effectively by this artist. And that's the way that you need to think about it too. It's like, okay, I want the focal point to be on the piano. Cool. Maybe put a light like right above it so that you have like a spotlight going here. Put the front and the back in shadow. And then you already have like a lot more contrast, right? Or you could have like blinds that are like partially see-through so that you still get like a little bit of light, but most of the light is coming in from the piano or like onto the piano, right? You really need to play around with it, right? And like really think about like, okay, where are my values gonna be? Where's my lightest spot or like my brightest spot gonna be? Yeah. There's so much cool stuff happening here, right? In this concept art. You can kind of see that like this tower is also inviting you in to look at what's on the top here. Again, nice contrast, right? We got a really bright point that is surrounded by like a bunch of darker spots, right? Contrast, again, super interesting. Okay, Will, best of luck. You got this, buddy. Is your window falling down? No. That's a normal window thing that happens in Europe. You can like tilt it open so that you don't have to open it completely. It's cool. Look at all this technology. Okay, let's actually have a look at the question that was being posed here, right? So, where did it begin? 3D modeling and everything is a bit too overwhelming. Any advice for that? I feel like everyone is so fast and I'm so slow. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. And then let's see. So Mattia was saying, find a tutorial where something that you like is being made and follow along. That's good. And repeat again after you finish. That is also really good advice, because you want to make sure that if you follow a tutorial, that you can also like repeat the steps after it and like use it on something that is what you want to make, right? Another tip that I'll give is go for the smallest possible end result, right? In the beginning, you don't want to be modeling anything complex. You don't want to be modeling like massive environments or anything that you might have in your head that is just way too big, right? Start with something really simple. Start with a cup. You know, the thing there is that if you can have something in front of you and you can take it and you can actually like look at the shapes, that's where you can learn. Because what you're trying to do, especially in the beginning, right, is you're trying to train your artistic eye to pay more attention to the details that we oftentimes forget in life. So like, okay, this cup, oh, it has a little divot on the bottom. Interesting. There's like a little bit of like a slope going on here. There's a lot that you can see that you oftentimes miss when you look at pictures, right? I would honestly start there and just keep it really small, really simple objects. And then over time, the more comfortable you are, the bigger and like the more complex the object can become. Let's see. If I do follow a tutorial and after I make a model, I forget some steps, any advice for that? So yeah, that actually comes from just repetition, right? Honestly, like if you forget some steps, you might also be looking at it the wrong way, right? Because that also means that you've internalized a lot of the other steps that you didn't forget, right? So there's two ways of looking at that, which is good, right? Because if you can internalize a lot of the other steps that you did internalize, that means that you're making progress. And the other steps that you forgot to do, you're gonna do that again, you're gonna do that again, and then after a while, it becomes second nature. But it takes a while, right? It takes a while to get to that position. And honestly, yeah, the more time you put into it and the more time that you put in and you do it in a focused manner, the quicker you're gonna become better at it, right? There's a big second part that I wanted to bring up here is don't compare yourself to someone else. Because you don't know what situation they have in life, right? They might have literally nothing else to do with their time, and that's why they're spending so much time with 3D modeling, where in your case, for example, you do have other commitments, right? So it's kind of unfair. Like the thing that you just need to keep in mind is that you can only do your best, right? Keep building up that consistency, keep doing what you want to do, and over time, you're gonna get as good or even better as them. Yeah, because everyone is kind of just like on their own little journey, right? Especially in an artist journey. That like at a certain point, everyone went through like all the difficult parts to get to the point where they are now. So that I hope that those people get rid of the comparison a little bit, because it can be damaging. Chubranshu, hello. I hope I pronounced that right. Good to see you here. You actually, let me read some of the advice here, right, Pintia, so that I can learn a bit as well. Right after you finished and got the result, just try to make a project similar to what you did from the tutorial. Yeah, that's great. Just smaller and on your own. That's awesome. Like for example, you watch the tutorial for a hard surface object. Make a scope with the same pipeline. Yeah. You're actually learning when you do stuff on your own and solving the problems. Yeah, and problem solving along the way, right? Yeah. Great advice. Thank you so much, Mattia. Oh, shit. Sorry to hear about that. From double negative, right? DNGE? Oh no, D-neg is double negative, right? DNGE? Trying to think. I have no idea what that stands for. Oh, D-neg. Okay, okay. Hey, Pandoras. Hey, Sheila. Hey, Daniel. Good to see you all here. Yeah, sorry to hear about that. I hope that you get something soon. Something else. Okay. Let's go back into some more feedback. So, let's do the next one with... I think we're gonna go with Maya. So, Maya has a couple of questions here. Is the current composition of the scene better? Yes. So one thing that I'm quite confused by is because we have like a bunch of pictures here, right? Is my main question is gonna be, hello? Better. My main question is gonna be, which one of these is gonna be your main one? Because it is cool that you have like multiple screenshots, right? But I don't think they're all necessary, especially because you're trying to minimize the work that you're doing, right? So just keeping like one main shot and then dressing it up completely. And then some of these are so similar, right? Especially these two. And I think this one here isn't even like a composition, right? It's just to showcase like the scene itself. But yeah, I would pick one that you kind of stick by, right? Unless you're trying to give me like an overview, right? So which one is the main one? I would honestly go for something like this one here, right? I think this one works quite nicely. My fear with this one is that you have to build like a lot of stuff here, right? To fill up this space. I don't think it's worth it. I think just going for something like this, like we discussed last week, is good. The only thing that you want to keep in mind is the composition, right? So if you have your frame, easy way to do it is rule of thirds, and then put your coffee machine here, and then have the window here, right? Just making sure that like your focal point is like a little bit off balance, because it always looks weird when like your focal point is like in the middle. We like when things are like off center. It has its purposes too, right? When you want to go for like a centered composition, but for most things, we kind of want it off center. So, rule of thirds. How do I join your Discord channel? It's in the description down below. You can go to our website and become a member there. It is a Patreon only Discord though, so keep that in mind. Yes, I will make sure to never compare myself and do hard work even if it's a bit slow. Yeah, the thing I'll give you like a thing there, right? Is that even if you were to do, like, if you're only doing like 1%, right? You're doing 1% here. Like this tiny sliver is 1%. That 1% is still gonna end up like over here compared to if you did nothing, right? So it's the 1% over like a long enough time is actually going to be a much more effective and much more sustainable way of doing things compared to having like, man, I'm going to go for it. Oh, maybe I'm not. You know, meh. That kind of thing, right? You want to build consistency and you want to build that up over time. Because what I've seen a lot is that people, they go at it with like real passion and then they go really hard for a really long time and then they're like, eh, and then they're done, right? For a really long time as well. Take it slow. It's your pace. It's your life. And it's your artistic journey, right? That's what we're all about here. Okay, back to what we were saying here. So Maya's asking a couple of other questions. Should I fix some of the textures? I know that not everything is textured yet. Let's see. This is a tricky one. So I would definitely look into the textures again. But what I would definitely look into first is lighting. So the textures can definitely be improved, right? So they can definitely be improved. But I feel we're not getting like a really good look because the lighting is really, really basic at the moment. So improve the lighting first before anything else. That's where you want to start. Because right now I'm missing shadows. Like I'm not getting like a really good material response. Right? It's very, very chaotic at this point. Because your textures depend on your lighting. Right? They go hand in hand. So if you don't have like a good lighting setup, you're never gonna show off your textures in a good way either. Right? You need both of them to happen. And I think, yeah, so how do I approach rendering of the scene using HDRIs? And is Marmoset enough for a cool render? I think Marmoset is good enough for an environment render, right? I've seen some really interesting renders happening. Most of them for single props, like in really simple environments. But you can definitely use it for an environment. But I will say that I'm gonna say all of my experience when it comes to lighting has always been inside of an engine rather than Marmoset. But I would definitely start using actual lights, get like a good HDRI in there, right? That's gonna help, especially with like the background and stuff, and with the reflections of the metal too. But any more in depth than that, you'll probably have to figure out for yourself, honestly, because I've never really done like any rendering in Marmoset, so I don't know where all the cool tricks are and like what you need to enable and all that stuff. But if you want to go into Marmoset and you want to render in Marmoset alone, that's totally fine, right? You can render like a scene in Marmoset if you wanted to. Yeah. And then, any tips regarding the texturing workflow? Should I make my materials from scratch in Substance Painter, or should I look up some textures online to help me, to help my process? I don't like the current textures that I have so much, and I was wondering if there's a way that you would recommend me to do. So, this heavily depends on what you want to focus on. If you want to focus on just making sure that the coffee machine looks really nice, make that into like a Substance Painter thing, right? Like have like a unique texture for that coffee machine, and the rest of it you can pull from external sources, Megascans, other sources, right? If you want to make a lot of the scene yourself, then I would recommend going into Substance Designer, but that depends on how good your experience is with Substance Designer at this point, right? So there's a lot of context needed there if I wanted to make like an accurate statement here. Yeah, you can definitely look up textures online if that helps you, pulling from Megascans, all that kind of stuff. Bye, Michael! Good to see you here, though. Oh, Kyle, that's an interesting trick. So when learning a tutorial, take notes and write them like you're going to try and teach it back to yourself. It helps retention. Interesting. Okay. Actually, sit back down. Okay. So when talking about your scene, Maya, yeah, I would definitely go for if you're using tidables. This is basically the way that I look at it, right? Like, very simple. Tidables are in Substance Designer. And then unique maps, like the coffee machine, that's Substance Painter. That's the way that I would do it. 100%. Because most of the stuff here is mostly built out of tilables. Right? And you want the focus to be on a coffee machine and its surroundings anyway. So you can get away with that. Let's see if there's anything else that I can help with here. Yeah. I think honestly, like, the third step here is going to be the biggest one. Right? It's just, we need to get the lighting in a good spot so that we can accurately judge what's happening in this scene. So having like a directional light that is casting shadows, and you have it like properly aligned so that we get like the focus on the coffee machine, right? So that we can accurately judge what's happening in the scene. That's going to be the first step. So definitely try to get that in first. Because otherwise, like, it makes it really hard to look at the textures, right? Awesome. I don't know if anyone put their hand up yet, but who wants to go next? I don't know if we have people that are on the board here that want to go next. Hey Irfan! How often do you do feedback sessions, and where do I send my work for critique? This is like a community critique only session, and I do them each week. So every week you can just tag your work for feedback, and I'll incorporate them into this session. It was every Wednesday. Ankur is here. Awesome! So let's move on to Ankur then. I'm curious to see Daniel's rocks. No! No, spoilers. Spoilers. Can't do that. Okay. I've made some changes in my scene after Whip Wednesday. Updated the color of the river. Wait, why do we have like two different... Okay, let me read first because I'm getting ahead of myself again. I've been doing a camera animation for the scene. Accordingly, I will be working on the scene moving forward. I've attached two lighting scenes. Which one is looking better? Okay, so we get to decide which one is looking better. As I read through this, I'm gonna allow you all to vote on it as well. So we have number 1 up top, and then number 2 down here. What do you all think is the one that we should go for? Feel free to vote with 1 or 2 in the chat. And then I'm gonna just finish up reading here. So I've started texturing for the house. Right now I'm using 4 or 5 texture sheets. That's fine. I'm planning to use a height lerp for the variation in dirt and use that for decals. Should I use a second UV workflow RGB mask or not? I'm confused with this. I guess this might increase more work. Okay, we got some good, interesting questions. So let's look at the vote. We got a lot of 2s in here. Okay, it's undeniably number 2. Awesome. And I do agree with it as well. Like, the thing that I like about number 2 is that we're getting like a better separation from the house and the background. And also, like, the water is, again, less attention grabbing, which I like a lot as well. So that's all good. Like, the top one feels a little bit more flat, right? Like, all the individual like values are starting to blend together a little bit too much. Oh, Dennis is coming in with a hot take. Dennis loves the background of the first one, but the second one for the foreground. Okay, okay. So I like 2 primarily in colors, but I also would like to see the path being lit up in 1. Oh, okay. I see. That would be an easy fix, right? Like just remove some of the trees so that you get like a little bit more light spilling in here. That could be interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting feedback here that you can take away, Anchor, just from the people in the chat as well. So, number 2 seems to be the crowd favorite. Let's go with that one. That is an ugly hard taste. There we go. A little bit more expressive. Awesome! And then let's move on to what you were asking, right? So, I'm confused between them. Right now I have 4 to 5 texture sets. I'm planning to use a height lerp for the variation and dirt, and I can also use decals. So the main question here is, should I use a second UV workflow with an RGB mask or not? I don't think you need to have it, because we're not going to be looking at it up close, right? And you're also going to be doing a lot of additional stuff that is basically going to negate what you would get from an RGB workflow. How do I join the community though? That's down in the description. There should be a link to it. It takes you to the website, and from the website you can sign up. So yeah, I would not go for like an RGB workflow. I would honestly just set up like a very simple vertex paint if you wanted to. A vertex paint, and then add decals, right? Like decals as you want them to. It gives you a lot of flexibility without any of the technical hassle that you would otherwise have when doing like an RGB masked workflow. Like an RGB mask workflow is actually more suited for if you have a lot of different things that are kind of built out of the same trim sheet, but you still want to have like individual variation between all of it, right? So think about rocks, right? Like RGB masking is used on rocks because you get like a lot of variation through that RGB workflow. The other thing there is like what I'm doing, right, with my medieval scene. It's been a while since I've opened it up, but I'm basically building everything out of a single trim sheet, and then I add individual detail by adding an RGB mask on top of it. That's what it's really powerful at. If you just have one building, I would go for something that is built towards simplicity for one object, which is vertex paint and decals. And then you were also going to set up, yeah, the height lerp is probably like vertex paint, right? Yep. Yeah, so no RGB workflow, not needed. Keep it nice and simple. And that's it. That is it. So yeah, I think I also agree with like maybe some of the points that people brought up earlier, right? Like I kind of, the more that I look at it, like the neutral background is kind of nice. Oh man, but you can't do that though, because the neutral background also causes the reflections to be this heavy, right? Unless you make it less reflective, I guess. You start like playing around with the shader a little bit more. Yeah. Overall, my vote goes to number 2 as well. There's some stuff that I would definitely tweak, like the background is definitely something to look at. But most of the other stuff that's happening here, looking quite good. I really love the path. It makes the player want to explore that way as well. Yeah! Yeah, it adds like an additional dimension to the whole scene, right? No. Really good. It's very straightforward feedback, right? So I hope that helped. I have added a video with the camera animation. Have you seen it? I looked at it before. But yeah, I think most of the information is here in like the images, right? Because we're basically, I mean, we're quote unquote just zooming into the environment, right? Oh, yes, I did look at it. And there was one thing that I wanted to bring up is that the more that I look at it, the boat starts to feel really out of place for the environment. Right now at this distance, it doesn't matter too much, but that boat starts to feel Like this is actually just like a boat that you would see in like a small harbor, right? This is not necessarily a boat that you would see like on the river somewhere. So to me, it feels kind of like really out of place. I would honestly think that it might be better without one. But I'm gonna leave that up to you. I'm gonna post that as like a question, right? That's like the main takeaway. That was different from like all the stuff that we discussed before. That would be my question. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your work. Okay, last question here. What changes should I make for the background? Some of the people were bringing up like really good suggestions, right? Where a lot of people, like some people seem to love like the background in the first one, and then having the rest as you would have in like the second one, right? So to simplify it, combine the background of number 1 into number 2. That's basically what you should do. Something around that. Because it does change like the whole mood of the piece, right? And I feel like even though it looks like a little bit more neutral, I think it actually works really well for the background. The only issue there is that, like I said before, right, you have to take into account the reflections as well. So maybe an in-between. Yeah, and exactly like Brandoom is saying, it has more of a desaturated atmosphere, right? Where normally the further you are in the distance, like it would like desaturate based on distance, right? It's not gonna get more intense color-wise. So it feels more natural as well. A great thing to bring up, Brandoom. Please add some birds as well. Yeah, that would be awesome. Some little birdies. I'm gonna add this as a bonus one, right? Burps. Let's go for the bonus burps. Okay, cool, Anchor. Thank you so much for sharing your work. Keep up the good work. I see that you're adding a lot of changes. It's really cool that you added so much stuff to the house as well. It's gonna be cool, man. It's gonna be cool to see this coming together live. I'm excited about it. Awesome. Okay, next up, since we have it open anyway, let's have a look at Daniel's rocks. And Daniel is asking a couple of questions here. Is it good enough for 2 portfolio pieces in terms of size? So, maybe let me take a step back first. Because I wanted to bring this up, right? This is the comparison. This is the comparison that's happening. This is basically Daniel's previous work, right? And he really wanted to improve the rocks, right? And how readable they are. And if you now look at what we're looking at here, looks way better. So, first point, massive improvement. Love it. Love it. That's awesome. And now we can dive into the questions, right? So the first question was, is it good enough for 2 portfolio pieces in terms of size? My question would be, is like, why do you want to split it up in 2 portfolio pieces? Because to me, that sounds like you're trying to go for more quantity on your portfolio, where you should be aiming for quality instead. Because you could easily make this one post and say like, you could call it rock sculpt or something like that, right? It's gonna have like a pretty generic name because it's rocks. It would be weird if you're then gonna split that up between these 2 guys and have them in like separate pages just to add like one more square on your portfolio, right? Always think about quality over quantity. That's the way you should always look at it. And they're really, really good, right? Add a couple of breakdowns in there. Like the wireframe is a good start. Show me the textures as well. Show me the shader that you've done for it. Like, look at, like, sell it to me, right? Like, sell it to me like I don't know what this is, and you're trying to sell me like, oh, this is all the functionality, this is all the cool stuff that I did. And add to that quality, right? So sell the presentation and add to that quality. Rather than focusing on the quantity, right? Less is more when it comes to this. Okay, overall opinion on the textures. And if I overdid on the contrast. I don't think so. I think they look really nice. With rocks like this, you have a lot of control over them in the engine, right? So showcasing that is going to be really crucial, and it's going to be like super impressive if we can like tweak it all in the engine. That's going to look really nice. Overall, I really like them. Sometimes they go into the realm of just really noisy, right? Like usually what you want to have with rocks is you want to have like a shape distribution going from large shapes, large to medium, and then small, right? So that there is like a built-in readability on any surface that you create, and you can apply this to like a lot of things, right? In design, this is what is called like the 70-30 rule, where you have like 70% rest and then 30% details. There's a whole bunch of different names for like all these different rules, but yeah, they just get like a little bit too noisy, right? Like the main shapes are really cool, but I would then also let them take a breather and not have so much like high frequency detail on them. That's the only thing that I can bring up though. And that is like easily fixable by just tweaking the mask, right? So keep that in mind. But that's like about the noise distribution. Then let's see. What can I add/remove to increase the overall quality of the models and the textures? Apart from what I just said, right? There's not too much that you can do there. I would honestly focus on how you're going to be presenting them next, right? And really, really make it a really good presentation. That's kind of what I want to see, right? Because this showcase already showcases that you do have a really good Oh, Daniel, we're gonna go into that in a little bit because I have a really cool trick for that. So what I was saying is that the presentation here is already really, really nice, right? But I kind of want to see it in sort of like context, right? That always takes it to the next level for me. Imagine. I'm trying to think, right? Because what came to my mind first is maybe it would be cool to do like an actual before and after on your portfolio. That could be an idea. I'm trying to think about the downsides, right? I don't know. It could be cool to have that before and after on your portfolio, right? So that you see like, hey, look, this kind of what this is how it looked before, but now, bam, you know, you have this wow effect of like before and after that comes in. That image is after? Oh, okay. If that is after, then we need to work on the lighting. I thought this was a comparison. Okay, so there's a massive difference in terms of the lighting then. Like we really need to tweak that, like a lot. Basically, all the lessons that you learned from presentation in these guys, right? You need to transfer that over to the actual environment. Because this, I know it's stereotypical, right? We got a warm light, we got a cold light. The two always work like a charm. Bringing that into your environment somehow, while still keeping the context of the environment being lit, that's going to be key, right? That contrast between the two. If you... That adds a little bit of context as well, right? So if you want to turn this into two separate portfolio pieces, right? If we go back to that point for a little bit. So if you want to have two pieces, so piece A is your environment. What I would do then is do props. Props and rocks and anything else, right? That's if you wanted to do two, right? Because you don't want to bloat like one post with like everything. You can separate the two out, call them the same name, but just have like, I don't know, canyon scene and then canyon rocks, right? Like separate them out that way. And that's one way that you could do like two different posts on your portfolio. Just for the rocks itself, I wouldn't do it. Last thing here. Oh, wait, no, you had a question for POM. I don't think POM is worth it. Like, you have so much like nice surface variation already that parallax occlusion mapping is not gonna do like anything worthwhile, right? I don't think it's worth it for these rocks. I would use that on like flat surfaces. That's what I would do. Last thing. So, POM. No. POM. No. Last one here. I wanted to share this little tip. Hey, Tim! Hello, hello. How's it going? So this last little tip, right? Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the before and after. Okay, interesting. Yeah, definitely your lighting can definitely be improved, you know? Because those individual shots, they look so good, but then you place them in the environment and they kind of lose like that special sauce, you know? Okay. So, about the spaghetti, right? The spaghetti is fine. It looks like really neat and orderly, right? I would not put that on your portfolio. What I would do is present how it's going to be used in the environment. Because that sells way better than just having like a static image of just like a bunch of nodes that, yeah, no one can really read anyway, right? So it kind of loses its purpose a little bit as well. What I would do is just have your material instance window open, have like a nice composition of rocks, and then manipulate your instance values to showcase what it is doing, right? It comes down to like selling the work that you did instead of just putting like a spaghetti on your portfolio, right? Because you really want to sell like all the things it is doing and like impress people with it, right? And I don't think like a material graph necessarily does that. So that's the way that I would approach it. No spaghetti. Got it. Yeah, this is interesting, right? Because I keep asking that question to people we talk to, right? Like other industry professionals. And some of them say, yeah, I love to see like the technical breakdown of a material, right? This is mostly coming from like tech artists and material artists. But yeah, I feel like I'm always coming back to like, unless you can make it high res enough, which is going to be difficult on its own, to have like the full graph so you can follow it and recreate it, right? Because then it becomes a resource for the community to recreate. I don't think it's worth it. Because a portfolio to me should sell your abilities, right? And I feel like You know what the equivalent of this is? It's like someone handing you a flyer as you go into a party. You're like, what do I do with this? You know? Like, no, I don't need it. That's the way that this feels to me. Might be a weird comparison, but hey. So yeah. No spaghetti. No spaghetti. Awesome, Daniel. Again, great work. Massive improvement. The thing that's gonna work in your favor a lot is if you have this sort of presentation for the full environment as well. Really thinking about like how you're gonna present stuff, gonna make a massive difference. So, yeah. Cool, man. Great stuff. Love to see it. Thank you so much for sharing your work again. Keep up the good work, buddy. All right. Straight on to the next one. Riddle said, can you add a bit of dirt in there in vegetation? It would bring them out a bit more. Yeah. So the dirt is something that is very flexible, right? With that shader setup, is that you can increase the dirt based on the masks, right? So that's where like the beauty of that system comes in. So yeah, Daniel can like easily tweak that, which is lovely. Okay. McVal, let's have a look here. Got a small update this week, which is awesome. Didn't have that much time. That's fine. Would like some feedback on the texturing and the damage this time around. The railing damage needs a bit more work. Looks very low poly and flat. Railing damage. Oh, this stuff here. I get it. It is interesting. I don't know if this works in this instance. I would potentially just keep this flat. Just keep this like straight and just have the damage like kind of creep up against it. And then have stuff that came from this damaged wall and let it affect the surface underneath it, right? So what I'm talking about is like little bits of rubble, lots of dirt on this little ledge, right? And like little bits of rubble, little bits of plaster, all that kind of stuff. I would do it that way instead than having like a cutout of wood, because that's gonna look, it doesn't look great, right? Like you were saying, it looks a little bit low poly. It doesn't look like that realistic either. So I would probably do it that way instead. What I do like is all the additions that you've done to this wall. This is coming along really, really nicely. Now it's time to kind of like think about like the details, right? So what we can introduce here, the lazy way would be to cover it with something. No, Daniel, we're not lazy. We're optimized. What I was saying here, like, what I would want to see now is have like a layer of plaster dust that is still clinging to like sections of like the wood underneath, right? That would be one thing. So let's say plaster dust. And then also on the opposite side, what we could do, because you have this nice transition happening already, which is awesome, I would then take it like one step further and like start adding cracks. Right? And say like, it's like an opening in the cracks. And that can just be like a decal, right? That you place on top of it. then we can really drive home like all the damage that's been done here. I'm gonna tell you now, and I think I mentioned this in the beginning, damaged and abandoned buildings are really tricky for this reason. They depend on a lot of detail that needs to be added and a lot of individual layering that needs to happen too. An interesting technique here for these kind of cracks is you could go the traditional way, right? Where you have your UVs and you just have like a damage patch here, damage patch here, damage patch here. What you could also do is have them all as strips. And then just be really creative with the geometry and add like more geometry and just map it onto a strip so that you could have like this little strip could be like a crack by itself, right? But if you map it to like a geometry that is kind of something like this, right? So that could be like one section and then like another bit of geometry is going to be this section, and you just make that into like little sections of geometry. You have a lot of flexibility to make any additional cracks in the rest of the building or like in the rest of the scene as you wanted to, right? So that's like two ways. I personally prefer to do everything in like a reusable, like modular way. That's why I love this sort of approach, because it gives you a lot of flexibility, right? Like if you were to change like this sort of decal, the only thing that you need to do is just like take a bit of the geometry and like align it different and you have like a new crack. Rather than having to, I don't know, do photoshopping in the best case or go into ZBrush again to like sculpt like a whole new crack, right? In this way, you just have to sculpt like a couple of strips and you got like everything to work with. Yeah. The ends, I know we talked about the ends before. Add more geometry, right? Like add like splintering. Just have like individual bits of geometry that are mapped to the same things that you have it mapped to, right? And then really look at like how ends like splinter and break apart and add a bit more geometry, right? Make it look really, really tasty. So more geometry. You can definitely use more geometry. Don't be afraid to use it. Okay. The railing damage needs a bit more work. Cool, we talked about that. With feedback on the texturing and damage this time around. Yes. Texturing, big improvement. I like what you're doing with the wall. We're getting some really nice contrast, right? Love to see that. That's going in like a really nice direction. Kat, thank you so much for the question and welcome to the chat. Is that modular way just a trim sheet with an opacity mask? Yes. Just a trim sheet dedicated for cracks? Yeah. That's the way that I was thinking about it. You would just have like a little sheet, right? With, let's say, just like, I don't know, how many sections you need. And then you just have like different cracks that you kind of sculpt in the middle of it, right? You might not even need 5. You can get away with like 2. You can have like a non-square texture, right? Where instead of having like a full square, you just have like half a square, right? You just have like a, let's say a 512 by like a 1024, right? Something like that. Depends on what you need, right? For a scene like this, you could probably get away with like a non-square texture. But yeah. That would be like a dedicated trim sheet just for little cracks and then use opacity on that as well. So, crack trim sheet. That's the way that I would approach it. And then the second part where we talked a lot about was just like additional layers, right? Like, the layers that we talked about, like the plaster dust and like the additional cracks. Like, that's the stuff that I want to see. Because at the moment, what it feels like is that you're getting some of it, right? Like, I can see that you've been trying, but I think you need to make that like a little bit more visible. You can do that with decals, right? Just have like plaster like random bits and make like a little atlas of like four plaster dust decals, right? With like different shapes, and then you could just shove them in between those individual layers and make it look really nice. Especially, like, we need to do that, especially because your camera is going to be so close against it, right? Like, people are going to really pay attention to it. The second wall, does it have water damage? Are you talking about this section here? I'm not sure which section you're referring to. No, I think that's just like the roughness variation in the texture itself. So there's gonna be like more polished areas and like more dull areas. I don't think, from far I can see, there's no cracks on here yet. Okay, thank you. Happy to join and learn. Yes, thank you so much for the questions. Feel free to ask them as we're streaming. So yeah, more layers. So that's like the plaster dust. Plaster dust. The cracks. And then just really pushing. Okay, I'm gonna try to make it clear, right? We're gonna have a look at some old broken wooden walls. Let's have a look what that gives us. Okay. See if there's like a usable one in here. Those abandoned buildings are usually like a gold mine for this kind of stuff. Da-dum. Okay. Let's go for a close-up this time. See if we can find something. See, like this kind of stuff already gives like a good indication, right, of what it could look like. See this stuff too? Yeah, but you get the point, right? Like this kind of splintering when we're looking at the wood just looks like different to what you have going on right now, right? And I think most of that was because we brought that up earlier, right? Like being scared of adding too much geometry, and I get that because some of this stuff requires a lot of geometry, but you can definitely add more, right? Like make it look real nice. The other thing that you could also do is, if you want to have like lots of like very fine splintering happening on the wood, right? Like let's say you want to have like lots of tiny splinters happening, make that into like a little alpha plane, right? Just have that as like a little cutout that you can sink into like a lot of different planks, maybe make like a couple of variations, and then you have like high frequency detail on just like a little opacity plane, right? Now those cracks would be in a decal material, right? Yes, yeah. been avoiding ZBrush like the plague and trying mainly to texture it. Yeah, so for like these edges, right? If you want to have like more high frequency, or like if you want to do this kind of stuff, right? Where you just have like splinters and stuff coming on it, I would not go to ZBrush for that. You could honestly just model all that stuff in. You just have to add more geometry and then play around with it, right? Like this kind of stuff, you could have like a section that is like pretty high in the amount of stuff that you need, right? In the amount of polys that you need, and then just make the rest of the plank just like simple again, right? To kind of compensate. But then you have something there. Again, this is only because we're so close up to it, right? So you want to really sell the effect of it being like splintered and broken. Let's see. We have like another example. I think there was one up here somewhere. This one, right? It's like an individual isolated guy, but this can be like a good indication. Also, think about where you're gonna add them and how much you're gonna add of it, right? Because you also don't need to do like all these blanks like that, right? You kind of want to have like the more boring ones, and then have the high frequency ones, like the ones that are kind of like sticking out, right? And then you could also do like a little crack here, where like this one kind of comes out instead. And then this one is just like a normal one like we have now. This one is maybe like a little bit more high frequency. Right? Like variation. Like really making it feel that someone like destroyed it, right? You can indicate a lot with this stuff. Instead of it coming out, like being broken out, maybe it goes inwards. Because someone really smashed it like on the corner and it's like folded in, right? So you can give an indication of what happened there. But yeah. Let the reference guide you on those things. Right. McFal, best of luck with that. I think that was it in terms of your questions, right, for this week? Yeah. Again, the improvements that you've made, already massive compared to last time, right? I can see that you thought about the layers, and this is miles ahead of what we looked at last time. Awesome improvements. So if you keep that up, if you keep looking at the references, and you keep like digging deeper, we're gonna end up with like a really, really good result here, man. So keep that up. It's gonna be great. And yeah, first time ZBrush, it is scary. I get it. Okay, let's switch it up. I think this one is gonna be a little bit more technical with Sunny. So Sunny has set up a dedicated shop for the castle, and I hope to receive some feedback on the castle images. I plan to use these images as a main render for my castle. Is this angle suitable? Okay, so first angle of the camera. This is something that I love to bring up, but if you want to make something feel personal, and you want to actually be embedded in the world, you gotta put your camera on a position where it can realistically be that I am in that position, right? Because if you have like a floating camera like this, it is good for like work in progress sharing, right? For this, because it gives me like a broad overview of what you're working on. But it is not great for a final composition because it's so detached from where we could be as humans that it makes it less relatable to us. So, put your camera on eye height. I'm actually gonna go back to your original concept, because It has done it so beautifully. That's the whole reason. Like, if you can imagine that, like, the banister in the foreground and, like, the image of, like, we just woke up and we're looking out on, like, a bustling city from our balcony. If that balcony wasn't there, we wouldn't have, like, this very personal kind of attachment to this picture. Because we would just be floating in space, right? It would still be an impressive picture, but it wouldn't have that, like, personal attachment and, like, that little bit of, like, sprinkling of the story in there, where you can imagine that this is, like, your Middle Eastern, like, Airbnb from, like, back in history times, right? And you just wake up and you're looking at, like, your fancy balcony onto this massive city. It is awesome, right? But to replicate that, we also need to find an angle that works for us where we can make it personal again, in this case. So, easy one for you is putting yourself on, like, the beginning of that bridge, right? So let's say we are on the bridge and we're kind of looking out onto the palace gates. This is probably, like, the situation where, like, a very centered composition is going to work really well. So imagine that you're on this bridge here, right? So you're a little person standing on a bridge, and our viewpoint is actually going to be looking up onto this massive gate, right? So what I'm imagining right now, that if we're gonna draw our little composition here, is that we have like the bridge, right? So we have those leading lines. We have the massive gate. Let's see. I'm not gonna do this justice, right? But let's see. Hello? Please erase for me. So we have this massive gate here. And we have, like, the pedestal above it. We have, like, the two towers. And because we have some, like, lens distortion, this is going to look, like, very impressive. Right? So that. And then we have, like, the wall all the way around it. Right? But you kind of actually want to see, like, you kind of want to sell this grandiose gate. And you're looking up into the city because the city has so many layers as well. Right? And you're going to see that from the top too. So yeah, that is probably, like, it's going to be, like, a very straightforward way, but this is probably, like, the best way to sell this piece without having to do, like, a massive environment around it. And again, it's going to be the most effective in terms of, like, telling a personal story, because now I can imagine myself being a traveler that's going to, like, this very exotic destination, and I'm standing in front of the gates, right? That is a powerful thing that a lot of people can, like, relate to, even if it's not, like, in a certain historical content, right? But you can imagine that as, like, an emotion that you go through when you go to, like, a massive city that you've traveled for, like, a long time and you finally arrived, right? Like, the relief that you get from that. So that would be the way that I would compose this image. Just showcasing, like, the impressive scale of it all, right? Without having to do, like, any background, right? Or barely any background work. Because with all the other images, like, it's nice that we can see the castle, but then that means that we also have to do the interior of the castle, because we don't really see into this. This is also empty, and, like, the whole back is not filled in either. Right? So we have to do, like, a whole bunch of stuff if we want to have this looking really good. Again, think about what we said last time, right? I want to have you focused on, like, what is important. And we're trying to condense things here. And this is gonna look, like, really, really impressive. Yep. I love something like this. There were some other questions as well. So during the process of creating the blockout detail for the castle, I encountered some difficulties regarding the relationship between textile density and the repetition of tiling textures when working modularly. Based on a 1K texture, I found that the texture repeats every 1 meter. We're working with a textile density of 1K, right? Because we're basically maxing out. And then texture repeats every 2 meters. We're going lower in textile density because we're not changing the scale of our actual texture, right? So let me visualize that for you guys here. So we got a 1024 texture, right? So that's our main texture. And then we have texture repeating every 1 meter. That means that we have a textile density of 1024 pixels per meter, right? Makes sense. Because with this, we can fill like 1 meter, right? So this like translates directly to this. So that also means that if we go 2 meters and we try to fill that up with the same sort of texture, that means that our textile density is going to go down, right? Because again, we're not changing our input texture. The same happens again if we're doing this, right? So, and that's going to go to 256. Right? Does a higher textile density mean more repetitive details? Interesting. I didn't realize that that's where we were going. A higher textile density means more repetitive details. No, the thing that's not happening here is that you're still stuck with the same input texture, right? So if, let's say, we were to increase this to like a 2K, then we can fill more space with it depending on the textile density that we use, right? So we can fill like 0.5 meter and then 1 meter and then 2 meters, right? And if we were to use like a 4K texture, then we could comfortably fit like a 4 meter inside of like a 4K, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing there with like the comparison between like the tiling textures and the textile density, right? Does that mean that a higher textile density means more repetitive details? No, because if you're only going to rely on the single texture, so let's say a single brick texture, right? And if you wrap that all the way around this wall, then yes, we're going to see a lot of repetition. But that is not taken into account like all the tools that we have to like available to us in the engine, right? So let's go with Unreal, or it doesn't even have to be like a game engine, right? You can set these tools up as well in like Maya, Max, or whatever. Like they're always available if you have to set them up. But some of the tools is vertex paint, right? Very straightforward. So that if you have this full wall, you can start painting like different sections with like different textures, right? It doesn't have to be one. You can set up 2 variations, 3, 4. You can go higher as well if you want that. Not necessarily in most cases, but that gives you a lot of flexibility, right? And it's relatively easy to generate like variations of a single texture. For example, if we have like a sandstone texture with like a certain pattern, we can then just go into Substance Designer and change the original inputs, and we could have like a different kind of pattern, and then just blend between them using vertex paint and use our height map to height blend them together, because that's going to give like a really nice result. So that's going to be height blending like multiple textures together, right? That's one of the tools that we have available, right? So that immediately gives us the impression that we're not only using, that we're not seeing like the repetition, right? So we need to actually do some more work by creating like additional texture variations to then get rid of that repetition. Right? You would never just use a single texture on like, let's say like a 20 meter wall and then just be like, okay, cool. This is all that I can do, right? So let's read on. I faced a situation where initially I used tileable repeating every 4 meters, and later I discovered that I had modular pieces with dimensions of 2 meter and 1 meter, forcing me to increase the textile density to repeat every 1 meter. Why though? Because they don't line up then? But that just comes down to... Oh man. I have to choose between keeping small modular pieces and minimizing repetition, and I'm confused about those two choices. I am really curious. Like, where these pieces are. Because I think the fact that you're struggling with this, right? If I understand it correctly, is that let's say you have like your texture, and for textile density, you can only map to this size, right? And you don't want to stretch it necessarily because of your textile density, right? First thing that I want to say there. Textile density is a rule that can be broken. I say this with caution, right? But you don't have to achieve perfect textile density all the time. The reason why textile density is there is to prevent us or to give us a guideline to what we should aim for. But if we're gonna be like, let's say if this is gonna be like your textile density, right? So we have like 1024 pixels per meter. But let's say you have to stretch and scale like some of your UVs, and that UV shell is gonna go to like 900 pixels per meter, right? No one's gonna see that in game. No one's gonna notice. Right? There is a point where it can get too much. So generally like a wiggle room of like, let's say 20% up and down, like that's what you can get away with, right? You can get away with more, but yeah, that's like a general rule. So breaking textile density is fine. I know, very controversial stuff here. So break textile density, right? Like these are both fine. And minimizing repetition. I'm not sure how larger game titles address this issue and what their solution is. Is there a common convention for the sizes of modular pieces in games? So, it depends on what you're trying to build, right? So, for example, if we look at the wall, right? If you have a massive wall like this and you're trying to build it out of modular pieces, I'm gonna say right now, if you're not reusing that wall ever again somewhere else, then it's not worth putting it into modular pieces. Right? Because if you only use it once, what you can easily do is just have that entire wall as like a singular module, and then just slap like a tileable on it, and then just in the engine like go in vertex paint and make it all pretty, right? So you don't necessarily have to have everything broken down into individual modules to make it work, right? It's a made-up problem. If you use a 4-meter tile texture, you can avoid using 1 and 2 meters, or you can use them but mask the seam by a column or something like this. Or you can just make this entire wall seamless. Yeah, 100%. That is actually a good trick, to just have a column or something like that there as well, to hide the seams. That's a great trick as well. But yeah, I think what's really, like, I'm trying to get to the core of what is happening here, right? And the further we dug, I think this is like First of all, confusion, and not really necessarily using modular pieces in the way that they should be used. That's what I'm getting from this. I think if you're gonna go and have a look at, for example, Assassin's Creed Mirage, you will see that a lot of the buildings these days are just like unique, with a bunch of different tilables and like uniquely set dressed. Explain that. Like with unique like edge decals and all that stuff, right? Like the very traditional way of approaching like modular pieces. That's usually reserved for if you have like a very grid-based game now. For example, if you can build your own levels and stuff like that, right? Very common in like survival games, for example. That's where you want to have like the traditional like modular buildings. For the rest of it, I would honestly just have like the tower completely separate. The tower completely separate, and then just dress it up with tilables, and wherever you have like these bits of damage, right, you just add like little bits of decals, you cut out geometry, all that kind of stuff. Again, I would look at Assassin's Creed Mirage, like just the breakdowns that they have. They're really interesting, and really study how they did the buildings. There's a lot of really cool inspiration there. I totally agree, by the way, Mattia. You don't have to be so rigid and dogmatic regarding environment art. There are dozens of ways to work around such issues. Yeah, and this is like a recurring thing that we have to talk about, Sonny. You have a big focus on the technical stuff. And in the grand scheme of things, the technical stuff, the optimization, pixel density, all that kind of stuff is way easier to teach someone than the actual execution of the art. So I would say if you have to shift your balance in terms of like the technical stuff, just more to like the execution of the art. And if something is going to be looking like more visually impressive, doing it that certain way, go for it, right? And like forget a little bit about the optimization. It's interesting that you try to do all this stuff, right? But it's currently forming a barrier for you. That's why I'm saying all of this, right? There might be people out there where like the opposite might be true, where it's just a bit too much focused on the art and you're not making game art anymore, right? So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, especially in your case, Sonny, have fun with the art. Again, look at AC Mirage. Like those walls and like those towers, make them unique, right? Yeah, that's the way that I would do it. Yeah, I 100% agree, Mattia. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think about like what else I could say to kind of make this really clear, but you asked a question yourself, right? I'm not sure how larger game titles address this issue and what their solutions is. But go and have a look at the larger games, right? I know that it's sometimes hard to find like breakdowns of this stuff, especially from textile density, but just look at how they build their buildings. Because you might be surprised that like a very traditional modular approach is barely done these days. Cool. Thank you so much, Sonny. I hope that the composition helped. I think the composition I'm really excited about because that's going to look really cool. But let's move on to someone else. And thank you for posting your work, Sonny. Hope this is helpful. Next up, we have Sheila. Sheila is working on a new project. I'm excited about this. I am excited. Let's go to Discord. Where are you? Hi Tim, I wanted to ask for feedback, especially about the textures, the lighting, and the composition. My main goal is to get close to the Overwatch style. Awesome. Short and sweet. I like it. Cool. There's some interesting shots happening here, right? I like what you're trying to set up. In terms of color balance, this one is really interesting. Well, let's say these two. Right, so this one is really good in terms of colors. This one as well. I think this one might be, if I had to pick the weakest one, right? It's probably gonna be this one, in my opinion. Even though I quite like what is going on with like the opening door and like the light shining on it. But yeah, the first thing that I wanted to bring up, if we're gonna get this gig started, right, is you have really interesting colors at play here. I think if we were to just shift the blue to be like more impactful on this section, right, where we can really see like almost like a blue window here, right, where the whole reason why I'm saying that is because it would be really nice to see like a contrast between this red corridor, then having like the blue kind of leading you into this space over here, right? Which is kind of clever why you have this like little cute arrow here as well. Like it's kind of helping you do that already. So I really like that. But yeah, making this part a little bit more intense in terms of like blue influence, right? It's gonna look really interesting, I think. One is looking really nice as well. Yeah, so using like color contrast as like a guide, right? That's the way that I would look at it. What else? Lighting and the composition. Oh, textures as well. I am honestly not too familiar with Overwatch. I played it like when it released, like for a little bit, right? But it's been so long since I looked at it. I generally do like the textures here though. The one thing that immediately stands out to me as like, that looks a little bit meh, is like maybe the wood underneath, like the wood paneling, is probably something that can be improved, right? But I'm generally a fan of like how you're approaching like the tiles. You have like little bits of like dirt, but they're nicely blended in, right? I like how soft they are. They're not like asking for a lot of attention. That's what I like about it. So yeah. Number 2 for the textures, right? The wood is one that like immediately jumps out to me. That can be like improved. Some Stray inspiration? Yeah. I think she called it yeah, Stray fan art. That's what it became at the beginning. Yeah, main scene from Stray. I'm gonna bring that up here. It's interesting, right? Because I was talking about like the blue, but they don't really do that in this game either. I mean, differences, right? I love Stray for just like its brazenness in terms of like colors and lighting. So good. It was a joy to play through that game. Yeah. And then nice reflections of the game environment. Yeah. Yeah, so like the wood kind of jumps out to me, right? Like it feels like, I don't know. Feels a little bit basic. That's what I'll say. It'd definitely be improved. And I know that you can improve it. The rest of it looks really nice. I kind of want to. So this is the thing, right? Like one of my suggestions would be to like look into palm or something like that to give some of the materials like a little bit more depth. Like I think like these stones could have like a little bit more oomph to them, right? Where you can see like the depth a little bit more. Not sure how applicable that is going to be to maybe some of the other ones. I feel like these tiles, they work great already. Maybe these tiles as well. Yeah. Yeah, not too sure what to say otherwise though. I think it's just because like I'm pretty unfamiliar with your like specific aim, right? To go for like a more Overwatch kind of style. In large terms, right? It looks like it. Like it's kind of like a really interesting blend between like what I would expect straight to be, but then once you start paying attention to the textures, it's more stylized, right? More towards Overwatch. Yeah, the wood and the stone floor. Especially palm on that could be interesting. What are some of the other things, like the lighting, right? We kind of talked about it a little bit as well. I like what is happening already. I really do. Off for the feedback. No worries, McFal. Good to help. Yeah, okay. So we got this like really nice, like zoomed in shot. This is probably from like a little bit ago, right? Yeah. It's really nice, like the edge variation that you have, where you could see like the older tiles, right? But then you have like the more pristine ones in between. I really like how these read. That's really cool. Yeah, and I think I'm a big fan of the composition as well. Even though like this one doesn't really have as good as a focal point, right? It's kind of just leading to this hallway, but we're not really seeing like the actual stall anymore. It is quite nice in terms of like color balance, right? It's almost like it's divided between like that tunnel of red and then the rest is just blue. I kind of like how that contrasts with like all the rest of it as well. Yeah, composition is really nice. I like this shot. That works. This one straight up works really well as well. Yeah. Beautiful work. Where's this guy? Oh, okay. So yeah, the stall is to our back. Interesting. This might be a nitpick, right? But if there's a car here, I would kind of expect like to see like a little glimpse of like a road or something like that, right? Where this is like the end of a road. We have like this little car that can just zoom off on the road as well. That's the only nitpick. But that's the thing. I like it so far. I think it's great. I love the compositions that you have. They all bring something different to the table, right? So yeah, generally I'm a fan of the current way that it's set up. Great choices. Great lighting as well. So not too much to add. I would just say keep it up, Sheila. Always a pleasure looking at your work. So yeah, great stuff. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your art with us. Always appreciate it. Thank you, Tim. No worries. Always happy to help. Even though it was little help this time around. It's just a joy to look at some environments, you know. I like where it's going. Cool. Last two for today. Let's see. I'm probably going to start with Dennis, right? A Gothic cloister. Okay. This environment is my expression of love for both Gothic architecture and the Soul series. I didn't use a concept, which I admit now. Was a big mistake. But instead, I just accumulated all the things I like in one environment. Okay, very risky play. Let's start there immediately. Now I realize I have no idea what it would be better to represent on later, like camera angles, compositions, and all that kind of stuff, and what to focus on now. Is it supposed to be... It is supposed to be like a boss arena, with walkways filled with tombs, statues, and large open area in the mid. Okay. While it's in the blockout stage, I would really appreciate any feedback. Cool. Yeah, I think you brought it up yourself as well, and there was like a bit more text here, right? So, my struggle for clarity, I was making a scene like a level and not an image shot with a proper composition. So I will have like multiple final shots, which surely means way more work. Shall I dump this idea, make a single camera, and ignore everything that is not coming in the camera view? Or do I push it through and follow my first idea of making a proper level? So, that's a very good question, and I think that's like overall what I wanted to talk about too, right? So that's awesome. What I like to focus on, right, is setting you up for success. And usually that success is heavily tied with like how big you set your goal for yourself. Again, I have no context of what work you did before, how big you've made your environment so far, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's always a good idea to start with a single camera. This also doesn't mean that if you made that single camera and you're like, man, I really just want to keep working on this. You can, right? But you can kind of see the single camera as like a save point. Right? So that's like, okay, cool. I have the single camera. If I want to put it on my portfolio, I can do so. But if not, I can still keep working on it, right? Because this is like a very ambitious project. Gothic architecture has a lot of really specific detail, right? A lot of sculpting involved, a lot of detail-oriented work. And you're going to be doing a lot of it if you want to make like, what was it? Statues. Let's see, where was it? Yeah. Walkways filled with tombs, statues, all that kind of stuff. That is going to take like a lot of in-depth work, right? And that's going to be very repetitive after a while. So you have to watch out for that. What I would do is just take like a single screenshot and take one that's really interesting, right? Like these two are really good examples of what you can do with it. Like they both have like big overview. It's still going to be a lot of work, mind you. Like there's still going to be like lots of pieces involved. But you can have like a whole bunch of like shortcuts as you're working on it, right? Because if you're working with like a very foggy and you're working with like a very Dark Soulsy environment where there's going to be like lots of fog, like lots of doom and gloom in the air, right? Then what you can do is all that detail that you were supposed to do in the back, right? So like, for example, the towers, you can kind of just shroud that in fog, right? So that means that if you really want to cut like a lot of corners, right? You could almost make that as like a base color, or just like take some textures that we have in the foreground and just slap that onto like geometry in the back, right? Because we're more going for the silhouette and the indication of some sort of texture than actually looking at it up close. So that's also a benefit, right, of working in the style that you're going to go for, contrasting with like the highly detailed like Gothic architecture, right? Yeah, I would definitely go for a single camera, start there, and then build up on it if you still want to go. Now I realize that I have no idea what how it would be to better present it on later, right, and what to focus on now. You mentioned also that you want to make it look like a boss arena. Make it look like that, right? In terms of like the focal point, right? So let's say in the middle here, you want something there that is like an indication of like a boss arena. It can be something like weirdly organic that contrasts with like all the rest of like the man-made stuff, right? But that's what I would look into. Like establish like the story first and build out the components that you need for it. Like a story MVP, right? So like the minimum viable product that we need to sell the story. That's what I want to see in the environment. And that's probably going to be like with the focal point, right? Which is going to be like around here. You can do like a whole bunch of really interesting things with like having lights coming from the church and like shining onto like the central pedestal and all that kind of stuff, right? Really cool things you can do. Plan some kind of VFX there, like a dimensional rift or something. Yeah. Whatever you want to do with that, it's totally up to you, right? So that's going to be cool. But make sure that you already have something that's representable of that final idea, like in the scene somehow. Get some like placeholder like VFX that you got from the marketplace or something, right? Yeah. Oh, there was another thing that I wanted to bring up, because to clarify why it is better to make like static images or like a video or whatever, right? Something that people don't have direct control over, is because it's gonna be way harder to have actual people like engage with it, right? Like for example, if you put that on your portfolio, like people are gonna engage with like a short clip and like lots of images. But if you ask them to like download something and like launch it, like barely anyone is gonna do that, right? So that's what I'm thinking about, like in terms of like where you put your effort and time towards your goals that you want to have, right? Which I'm assuming for most people here is get a job in games, right? So yeah, that's why. I just wanted to clarify that as well. I'm gonna head off for the day. It's almost 3 a.m. Oh, thank you so much for popping in. 3 a.m. I hope you enjoyed your sleep. And yeah, hope to see you soon. Also, should it be like a third-person view from the ground or a camera shot that's like slightly above, like the biggest picture now? Oh, no, this is actually what we talked about before, right? Like have your camera on eye height. Because that's always going to make it more personal. And that's going to help with the storytelling, right? I'm about to add a 6-step verification and 10 captchas before they get to my image. What? Yeah, so that's what I would do. Yeah, just straight up. That's what I would do. Like have it like close and personal, make it feel like we're actually in the arena, right? You could maybe, what you could do is, if we're going with this kind of composition, right? Like this guy over here. What you could do is have like a character like in front, right? Maybe like a character that you found somewhere, like on the marketplace or whatever, right? You buy like a pack or whatever. And you kind of have them be like a scale reference guide for us, right? So that we could be, imagine that we're like a party of people, like a party of explorers coming into this massive space. And then this is like the party lead or whatever, right? I think it could be really interesting to kind of play with like the sense of scale here. It's gonna be even smaller, right? Something like that. Yeah, I would keep it at eye height. Yeah. Cool. Short but sweet. I love the ambition. right? I'm always excited to see when people make like a massive thing and they're just like, hey, look, this is a combination of like everything that I wanted to make ever. Sometimes we have to temper that a little bit, but I love that initial excitement, right? And keep that going for the project, because if you execute on this well, like this is gonna be like awesome to have on your portfolio. It shows me that you already know kind of like how to manipulate a camera. I like the wide angles that you have going on already. The compositions that I'm seeing in some of the shots that you took are already like really solid. So we got some really fundamental like things that are already like in a good place to start building on top of. So yeah, I'm excited to see more, Dennis. And welcome to the community. Glad to have you. All right, and then last one for today. This one is from Honor. What could I possibly do to push the scene further? Any thoughts at all would be appreciated. I think I'm happy with the lighting. Yep, I think lighting overall is pretty solid here. I like the way that that looks. The main thing now, right? I'm kind of happy with the throne. I'm kind of happy with like how the stuff looks in the background. I think you did a really solid job. The only thing that is like a main thing is that, what is this? Because this is really unclear. Like, I'm not really sure what we're looking at. It might just be like a whole bunch of blood, right? But it's really unclear at this point. And it kind of looks like, honestly, it kind of looks like a mistake because we have like a bunch of these things like floating inside of it. And it looks more like it's like something went wrong with the material or something like that, rather than actually like something that's trying to look like a floor, right? That is like honestly like the main thing that keeps popping up. Because what would I do to fix it? That's the real question, right? I would honestly say less blood, question mark? I think it is blood. I'm not sure. And then more stone or something like that, right? That doesn't mean that you can't have blood, right? I think it could actually be nice where you have like, let's say, stonework coming from the sides, and then like in the center you have like this stream of blood, right? With like the occasional stone like sticking out of it. I think you can do something there, but it just looks really awkward now that we have like this massive river and it just looks like a really shiny surface. But we don't really get to see, like we don't get a good understanding of what it is. Again, doesn't mean that you have to get rid of it completely, but just adding something in there that gives us like an indication of what it can be. Right? Like just having like this stone trim and then having like stones that are like partially submerged in it is going to give us more context of what is actually happening, right? Because then we can see, oh, this was supposed to be like a stone pathway, but then for whatever reason, there's a lot of blood on the floor now, right? So I would do something like that instead. Yeah. What you could also do, if we flip that around, right? If you want to keep like the amount of blood. So first let me finish this off. So you want to make that stone pathway first, and then add like a blood down the middle, right? if you want to keep this amount of blood, I'm going to give you a second option here, right? If you want to keep this amount of blood, make sure that it's understood as like a river of blood. And what we can do there is either have like a person like partially submerged in it, right? That they're wading through it. Could be interesting. Or like a boat or something like that. So that we actually come into the scene where we're actually... How would I do this? But we are actually coming in on a boat or something like that. So that we get like an indication of like, oh wow. This is like an entire temple that is like just drowned in blood, right? Just something that sells the visual of what is happening here, right? So a boat or wading through, right? Like the person just wading through it all. That could work as well. But that's like the main thing that I would say. I think your lighting, definitely a massive improvement of what it was before. I kind of like that we have like this soft contrast between like red and blue in the background. Works really well. Let's see. Texturing of the archway looks really good now. Really happy about that. And then maybe the staircase area could use some work. I don't mind actually, especially if we're seeing it from this distance. It's good, right? Oh, one thing. I want to see some flames. For the candles. There must be a VFX pack, like even a free one that you can use. Just to add like lots of like individual like fires to these flames. That's gonna bring it to like the next level. Just like really putting like the details into the scene, right? Maybe even having like a bigger fire that's coming out of these guys here as well. Would be interesting too. Yeah. Really think about like finishing touches, right? Like what else can I add in there that's gonna really bring it to the next level? And that can be, like the VFX can be a part of that, right? I'm not sure how it's called in Maya, to be honest. Tim, do you remember it? Let's see. What were you both talking about? So, Mattia, instance of a module means geometry instance you were talking about? Let's see. What is that in reference to? Oh, this was the question from earlier. So, is it okay if we place the modular kits meshes in 3D software, or should we do it in Unreal? What is the best practice for this in the industry? For me, I'm more comfortable in Maya. Usually, if we're talking about modular kits, like a modular kit is something that you would use specifically in the engine, right? Because the reason for that is you want to reduce the amount of draw calls as much as possible, right? So if you're going to instance all the modules in the engine, you're going to have like one draw call for like each individual asset, right? But if you were to make them or like pre-build them inside of like Maya, for example, and then combine them, then you're gonna have that one mesh as like a single draw call, right? Because it is a new asset on top of your modular kit that you have in the engine too. So you would always have that in Unreal Engine. You can assemble the scene in Maya using instances or modules, then export it as a USD if done correctly. Oh, that could be interesting. Like, yeah, I haven't used USD before. I've looked it up. I know how it works, right? Like it's basically just like a new file format. It looks really interesting. I didn't know that Unreal like would interpret it in the same way and make automatic prefabs out of those instances. That is awesome if it does that. That could be cool. And if you're talking about like instance of a module, in Maya, that's just called like duplicate instanced, I think. Again, it's been a while since I used Maya. You have, it's basically like, I think it's a checkbox when you duplicate it or something like that. Or it might also be duplicate special. Somewhere there. Fire and lightning is getting exciting! Yes, it is! USD is amazing, it really works. Yeah, it's something that I want to play around with, but I haven't done like any art in like a long while, so. It's duplicate special. Yeah, there we go. I knew it was something like that. Okay. Whoa. Hello, finally have time to watch my favorite streamer. You're popping in as we're popping out, Aladdin. Thanks so much for saying hi, though. I appreciate it. I was actually about to sign off because it's getting pretty late over here. And I also still want to get some stuff done as well. So, appreciate everyone for being here. Again, if this is your first time being here, I do this on a weekly basis. So if you want feedback on your work, become a community member, and then you can get feedback. I just posted my blog out in the community. Will I get feedback next week? Yes, because I prepare everything before the stream, and then I give feedback during the stream as well. So I will definitely have a look at it next week, Con. Thank you so much for posting it. I will watch it as after the stream. Awesome! Okay, people, you know where to look. Look in the description if you want to join our community. We would happily have you. And then, yeah, you'll see me next week. Same time, same place. And I wish you all a nice evening. See you soon.